on the live stream to also ask some questions via Slido. For that, please log on to slido.com with the hashtag Masterclass or scan the QR code. But before we get into the questions and the introduction from the panelists, I wanted to talk a bit about sustainability and the role partnerships play in that. It's obviously, sustainability is a multifaceted topic. It combines elements of both the physical and the technical world, but it also has a social component. As such, it takes into consideration topics of demand and supply, and perhaps more importantly, also incentives and sanctions. And that's because sustainability has to take place within our current economic system, and our current economic system is largely built on competition. Competition between states, competition between companies, but also competition between individuals. And then on the other hand, we see that as a human species, we're perhaps only as successful as we were or are because we managed to cooperate on a large scale. We did this either in the form of tribes that then became nation states, but we also did it as individuals in companies and as individuals on an individual basis. Sure, some steps to sustainability can be taken and must be taken alone. I refer here to any action that you can do in your office, in your factory, you know, where you can turn off the lights, reduce the food waste. You don't need partnerships for that. Even some technologies and efficiency improvements can be done alone. But we've realized that this patchwork of individual initiatives is not going to be enough to address the changes needed. We need to decarbonize extremely rapidly, and by decarbonize, I mean get rid of carbon in our economic system, to the tune of, more or less, this is what the science tells us, we need to decarbonize at a rate of 13% a year if we want to achieve 1.5 degrees as agreed upon in the Paris Declaration on Climate Change. But even if we say, okay, 1.5 degrees, we're never going to make it, we're going to aim rather for 2 degrees, we need to decarbonize then by 8 to 9% a year, which is just a bit more than emissions dropped during the most recent COVID crisis. The problem is that we need to do this kind of reduction of carbon emissions year after year for the next 15 to 20 years if we want to reach those 2 degrees rather than the 1.5 degrees. But don't be fooled, you know, half a degree sounds maybe a little, but the climate is not a linear system. The climate is a system that has a lot of tipping points and feedback loops. So the difference between 1.5 and 2 degrees is actually quite large. To put it into perspective, with 1.5 degrees, the estimates are that 1/6 of the population, of the global population, will be exposed to severe heat waves every 5 years. If we go to 2 degrees warming, that number jumps from 1/6 to 1/3 of the global population. The heat wave itself could last up to 50% longer if we go to 2 degrees, and double the amount of insects, plants, and vertebrates will be affected and have their habitats halved if we go to 2 degrees. So while that's all very bad news, there is some good news, perhaps also coming from the COVID pandemic, and it's this. The pandemic has shown us that when our backs are against the wall, incredible things are possible. The partnerships catalyzed between governments, scientists, and the private sector managed to bring out a massive testing system and, perhaps more importantly, developed a new vaccine for a disease the world hadn't seen before within 12 months. This is a remarkable testament to our ability to innovate at scale, fast, when we feel we must. At the same time, the cost of solar electricity, for example, has dropped 89% since 2010. Efficiencies of solar panels have increased from 15 to 26% over the last 40 years. Onshore wind energy has the costs of that have fallen 70% over the last decade. Lithium-ion batteries have declined in price by 97% over the last 3 decades, and the energy density has almost tripled in 10 years. Renewables have now become the cheapest source of electricity production around the world. In half the world, already today, installing new wind or solar power is cheaper than running existing fossil fuel power plants. These developments were largely spurred on by government investments, energy policies, and private sector backing. Photovoltaic, to give you an example, photovoltaic panels benefited from early research in the US, an aggressive feed-in tariff in Germany, and a massive production scale-up in China. But this is by far not enough. But it does show how far partnerships can move us forward if we want to. So before jumping to our panelists and discussing this, I'd like to outline a few types of possibilities of partnerships for sustainability. So first of all, everybody knows this, the classical partnership within the value chain of a company. They include suppliers, distributors, retailers, investors, and joint venture partners. As a group, you can set standards, you can create incentives, you can provide financing, and that is one of the most fundamental forms of partnership that we see in our day-to-day business. Another example within the value chain of firms is insetting. Everybody has heard maybe of offsetting, carbon offsetting, where you can compensate your CO2 emissions by investing in another project. Insetting is actually where you invest in your supply chain and you help your downstream and your upstream partners decarbonize. That money that you invest, perhaps with your suppliers, reduces not only your footprint, but also that of your entire supply chain. And it might be cheaper than buying an offset, and it might be more long-lasting than buying an offset. That's insetting. So the second type of partnership that you see is within a sector, but between what would normally be competitors. You might partner with your competitor to spread a responsible industry standard. You might scale or you might replicate promising innovations together, and you might undertake joint research together or advocate towards public policy for a certain regulation. Then there are also partnerships between different sectors, where, for example, the waste of one industry is an input into another industry. Okay? There are partnerships between citizens, where various households join forces and set up solar panels and create a virtual power plant. Finally, a very classic example of a partnership is between governments and firms, either in the form of beneficial regulation or in the classical form of a public-private partnership. And so I want to close here perhaps by mentioning two very notable examples of the last 2 months of these kind of public-private partnerships that were recently announced. The first example is called the First Mover Coalition. This was just announced in Davos a couple of days ago. It's a global initiative that harnesses the purchasing power of companies that are in the 7 sectors that are very hard to decarbonize. They are aluminum, aviation, chemicals, concrete, shipping, steel, and trucking. And so the problem with these sectors is that in order to reach 1.5 degrees, they require technologies, low-carbon technologies, that are not yet competitive with the current carbon-intensive alternatives, but that must reach market readiness by 2030 in order to have any chance of reaching 1.5 or 2 degrees even by 2050. So to jumpstart the market, the coalition's members commit in advance to purchase a proportion of the industrial materials and the long-distance transportation they need from suppliers using near zero or zero carbon solutions, despite the premium cost that these solutions currently entail. The second example, similar, but it's related to carbon removal. So carbon removal, just as a little intro, is when you actually take CO2 out of the air and you put it back into the earth. Stripe, Alphabet, Google, Shopify, and McKinsey have made what is called an Advance Market Commitment, AMC, to accelerate the development of carbon removal technologies. They have committed almost $1 billion to purchase carbon removal, so the tons of carbon removal, from companies building these promising solutions. This will work in two ways. For early stage startups and suppliers that are piloting new technologies, they will provide funds to already purchase low volume amounts of CO2 removal tons. And for those companies that are already scaling up and ready to scale their technologies, buyers will purchase future tons of carbon removal if and when the suppliers can make it happen. And that guarantee allows the current scale-ups to secure financing to actually ramp up production to the scale necessary. Now, all of this sounds very nice and progressive, but the reality is also we've seen numerous partnerships fail. Partnerships that did nothing except waste time and resources, consisting of soggy compromises and with no real vision. So the question is, where and when do we need partnerships at all? And if we need partnerships, what type of partnerships do we need? Do we need to innovate maybe even around the types of partnerships that have been created so far? Since I don't know the answer to these questions, I'm going to turn now to our panelists. And I'm going to start with you, Andy. You are an early pioneer of the startup ecosystem in Austria. You've built a festival, dedicated to building partnerships between corporates and startups. And now you're working on sustainability and climate change with Glacier. How do you see this topic? What makes for a good match when collaborating and building partnerships? How do you know if it's the right partnership? And if you could speak into the microphone so our live stream viewers can hear us.
Yeah, so first of all, my motto is 1 + 1 is 3. I'm an entrepreneur. I've founded 4 companies. My recent one is Glacier, and I think, Philip, you said you are not an expert in partnerships. I think the examples that you just mentioned were very, very well perceived. So what we believe is a very fundamental part of a partnership is trust. And this is what you need to build. And based on this trust, you can identify where are the strengths on the one side of the partnership and the strengths on the other side of the partnership. And one concrete example, what we do. So at Glacier, our aim is to bring climate action in the DNA of every company. And we found a model that we deliver courses to the employees of the companies, and many of those courses are delivered by startups. Startups that are out there working on the technologies that Philip just mentioned that are needed desperately in these companies to push the transformation forward. And I really think quite similar to the transformation we are still in, the digitalization. When we talk to companies, they can't hear the word transformation anymore. But in fact, we are already in the next transformation. And this one is for sustainability. And we believe this transformation will have to happen faster than digitalization. So we cannot postpone it. As we just heard, we cannot postpone it. And on the other hand, it will affect companies more than digital transformation did in the past. And for this, it's absolutely crucial to find these partnerships. But as we know, and this is why we are also working together with pioneers, when we talk about big corporates, the big ships, the big tanker, was it tanker? The big ships, yeah. tanks, the big tanks. They are not that fast in developing technologies that we need. On the other hand, what we see here in these days, there are so many awesome technologies out there and ideas out there delivered by thousands of people that are working on those solutions. And we match those both.
Right. You also work with employees of companies, right? Have you seen any partnerships result from that? I mean, you help companies build green teams within a company. That means also people from different departments, but also between companies, perhaps, when they come to your courses.
Yes. So, for example, that you can imagine how such a course looks like. We have 120 employees from around 40 companies in a four-week program where they get climate competencies. Because we believe the transformation is only possible if not just a sustainability department is working on this topic, but in case every job is a climate job. And when we started these courses, it was so fascinating that employees from different companies were talking to each other and they recognized, okay, we are all in the same boat. They are not that much further than we are. So let's team up and work on this. And the fascinating thing, and this is also a difference in regard to digitalization when it comes to sustainability, the employees and the companies are willing to share their learnings because they know they are all sitting in the same boat. So we have this so to say big enemy, the climate crisis. And interestingly, if we have this big problem, then of course not if it's some really deep research that you do, then you don't share it, but practices that you do. How can you motivate people, employees in your company to make them do more climate action? And the companies are really willing to share this, and this is also one integral part of Glacier to match make between the companies.
Interesting. Sebastian, I'm going to move to you now. You work at Scaleup4Europe. Perhaps you could tell us a bit what it is you do and how partnerships play a role in your daily work.
Sure. So my name is Sebastian Sessler. As you already said, I work at Scaleup4Europe. Scaleup4Europe is an EU-funded project that has mainly two goals. One, to support startups and scale-ups to access new markets, to grow. And the other one is to establish structures for exploiting synergies, cooperation between other partners. So Scaleup4Europe is you can say, is a consortium of 5 different partners coming from 4 different European countries. I don't know if you can see this. So the first organization is Berchtesgadener Land Wirtschaftsservice, which is the organization I work for. The second is Unternehmertum with Expreneurs, which is the accelerator from Munich. Then Pioneers from Vienna. The Chamber of Industry and Commerce of Serbia, and a technology park from Slovenia. What we are doing is so basically creating synergies between these different ecosystems, these different organizations for supporting partners. And we started this project at the beginning of 2020. And since then, we have been finding ways how to increase the synergies and the cooperation between these partners. And additionally, on the way, we have been joining or collaborating with a lot of other organizations across Europe, always for supporting the startups and scale-ups. And regarding the topic of sustainability, we focus on 4 different verticals. One of those is the smart region, where we focus on topics like energy, mobility, sustainability. And so there we are supporting this.
And who are the key actors in that, in the smart region? Is it the city, transport, companies?
So this technology field is lead here in the consortium by Unternehmertum and the Wirtschaftsservice Berchtesgadener Land. And what we do here is we are in close contact with corporates, but also with public entities. For example, what we did already twice was a Smart Region Day, where different public entities from different European cities and governments could present to startups and scale-ups what they have achieved and what they are looking for. So like a reverse pitching, you could say.
Okay. Interesting. Michaela, I hope I pronounced that right. You're co-founder at Sleepify. You work with mattresses, as I understood it, which are, as I also know, are usually just bought, used, and then discarded. So you've closed the loop and somehow managed to make what is thought of as a linear business into a circular one. So perhaps you can tell us a bit more how you came up with this idea and what partnerships helped you to build this company.
Yeah, happy to. So Sleepify was actually created during the Circle 17 Impactathon, which is run by Austrian startups here in Vienna and Respect. So they put on this weekend event over a year and a half ago, where you could work on sustainability challenges. And my co-founder Verena and myself were actually at the time working as consultants for Pioneers, and we were always the two consultants in the team really passionate about sustainability and social innovation. So we thought, okay, let's do this Impactathon for a bit of fun and also as some learning and development. We did not expect to come out the other side with a fully fledged business idea, which now a year and a half later is already award winning, is in the process of becoming a GmbH, has first investment secured, is in process of also getting our production up and running for our circular economy mattress. What we actually do is end mattress waste. Why do we do that? Well, during the Impactathon, we worked on a challenge related to mattress waste. How do we end that? And we both came across the statistic that 30 million mattresses go to landfill or incineration in Europe every year, and that's equivalent to 20,000 stacked Eiffel Towers. So it's actually really impossible to even imagine that number and that scale. And we were like, surely there has to be a way to end this problem. And that's what we put our minds to, and that's what we've been doing. In terms of partnerships, we are huge believers that circular economy requires intense collaboration. We have over 6 partners in our value chain. We work on a partnership level with the 4 pillars that you mentioned in your keynote there from our own competitors in the industry across waste sectors, also with our value chain partners, and then also on a kind of governmental level as well, especially on the topic of waste laws and also with regards to circular economy strategy on a government level as well. So yeah, everything we do is founded on intense partnerships, and to echo Andy's point, it really is built on trust. So yeah, we really place that as an important part when we were building our partnerships as well.
Okay, so please explain to me, how do you make the mattress go back into this circular loop? Just from a technical point of view, perhaps.
Yeah, very good question. What we found when we started researching the problem is that mattresses are made from an insane amount of materials. You might have foam in there, you might have some cotton, you might also have some polyester, you might then also have some natural materials. Then you've also got a lot, maybe springs in there. It's insane the amount of materials. So we stripped it right back to the basics, and our mattress only has 2 materials in it. And with circular economy, you always look to start from the very start of your design phase. That's where you decide what ends up as waste. So 75% of your waste is decided as soon as you just design the product. The rest happens obviously throughout the life cycle of the product. So we knew that the design had to be right from the very start. So with simplicity of 2 materials, that enabled us to get going. And then we used materials that can only either be re-entered back into production to be turned into a new mattress again once the life is over, or materials that can go back into industry to be recycled. Therefore, no waste. You know, it's all about really ending the need for any waste, whilst also having the challenge of having to minimize the CO2 impact as much as possible. So it's not an easy feat. We have, though, proven our solution. It's 50% less CO2 than conventional mattresses and just includes 2 materials. 75% of our materials can be reused into a new mattress again. The remaining 25% go back to industry for recycling. So it's as circular as it can get right now. We want to get better, though.
And so the 25% that go back to the industry, so you've made a partnership that they will take this back?
Exactly.
And it's a feedstock for their new production processes.
Exactly. So we actually own the waste since we are the creators of the mattress. Therefore, we can use the waste as our own production line again, or we sell it back to the industry for recycling. So.
And who would be the main buyers, or do they rent it even? I don't know.
Yeah, so our target customer for starting is hotels, so the hospitality industry. They account for 1% of global emissions, so it's a huge industry with huge waste. And they also buy in bulk, so we're taking advantage of economies of scale with our life cycle analysis and our CO2 impact. But that's our first target customer. B2C for now is a bit too challenging on a logistical level with the CO2 impact in mind, but we will eventually also move in there.
Okay, interesting. Thanks. Thomas, I turn now to you. Having spoken to you a couple of times about your professional career, you have a long career in consulting, various industries. You've helped a number of companies, set up strategies, develop partnerships, and also execute those strategies. So you've seen a lot of different industries and a lot of different things going on. Are there any lessons learned that you could say, irrespective of the industry, that makes for a good partnership?
Yeah, thank you, Philip. For sure, there are a lot of recipes. But first of all, I want to go back a little bit to what you told us and what you mentioned. We are at the moment in a remarkable time which needs so much innovation I have never seen in my career, and that's pretty long already. Yeah? So there are so many challenges out there. Why is that? Because coming with these climate targets, there are a lot of regulations coming towards the corporations, and there are a lot of unsolved issues out there. So the speed is coming from outside. Customers are putting pressure, regulations are putting pressure, and especially in those industries, the 7 ones you mentioned, CO2-wise, it's not clear, and the technology is maybe there, but not developed enough. So it's an exceptional time. And whenever it gets tough, partnership come into place. Partnerships in corporates is a pretty difficult topic, because corporates tend to know everything and to try on their own. And many corporates had a long history that they managed a lot of research and development internally and innovation internally. And this is opening up now because the magnitude of the problem is so large that in many fields it's clear we can't do it on our own. So the first step and the first prerequisite is that you make clear what are my innovation fields of play, what are the innovation areas I need to develop, and where can I go on my own, and where do I need partners in different areas. This is the first important step. The second one is to select the right partner, to clearly define what do I need, what complementary competencies do I need, or maybe I need more of the same competencies, I need more resources. So define what you need and select the right partner. And then the very important thing is to create trust, and this is based on expectation management. That you really set clear what are our targets and align the interest between the partners. Make clear what does company A want, what does company B want, what does company C want. To align these targets and put everything on the table and manage the expectations. And if this is set, then create an organization platform where the partnership is able to work efficiently. and where we enable decisions to be taken efficiently. Yeah, I know that you in your partnership structures also struggled in the beginning with a lot of decisions, that everything took longer, was delayed. This is very often due to the corporate structures and a not ideal organizational platform to take these decisions. So then obviously resources, that you dedicate enough resources and don't let it run as one additional project. Give enough emphasis and with resources to it. And then always create transparency where we are standing. What is the status? Are we moving forward? Are we going to reach our targets? And sometimes it's also time to say, hey, no, it's not going to work. Let's end it and not continue it forever. So transparency in the whole process and having a clear status, how we are moving forward is also another very, very important point.
Great, thanks. Andy, you wanted to comment on that?
I just want to add to this, as you pointed out, these major challenges that we are having. I think we need to think of a new kind of partnership. And I like the idea. We at Glacier, we say our biggest competition is the climate crisis. So it's not company AYZ, but it's really the climate crisis is our main competitor. And what you pointed out with the solar panels that were started in America, then Germany further developed them, and then China produced it. But it also took quite some time. And I think we don't have the time. So if we think about this model that you pointed out, ideally, we now share this knowledge and the status quo that you have about the science, for example, on the solar panels, shared with US, shares with Germany, and China is already ramping up to produce it. And I think we should think of this new model of collaboration, and we also should think of what stands in between us that we can do it, because we are running out of time, and this is a really interesting thinking experience, how we can do that. But also what we already see in the community that we are. I was in the startup community a couple of years ago, and there we already had this partnership. But in this climate tech community that we are in, we really see that we have this common enemy, this common competitor, which is the climate crisis. And I think if we can find this model, which is not easy and where I don't have the answer yet, but I would encourage everyone to think about it, then we also could tackle other problems like cancer. Or if you just think of biotech, if we would, and what we saw in the pandemic, if we are really willing to share it, I think, the sum of all parts is bigger than each part. And this is what we should think of.
Yeah.
Clearly here we have a couple of barriers to partnerships, and Thomas, you alluded to some, I think, and Andy, what you were saying also is that I think you were referring even to patents, technical knowledge. Sharing that obviously goes to the heart of many companies rely on R&D and the exclusivity of their patent to be profitable. Yet we also know that Tesla open sourced a lot of its patents so as to kickstart an electric vehicle revolution. So the question is, I guess, do we need to rethink some of these fundamentals of intellectual property as an exclusionary concept, right? It's Thomas, I mean, barriers to partnerships. One of those is patents. Are there any others that we need to consider?
Before we go to the barriers, come back to the challenges we're having. Yeah, you raised the questions if there is a barrier because of these patents and so on. Yeah, I think definitely there is, but the challenges we are facing now require very much an ecosystem approach and a joint approach. Let me give you one example. The industries you mentioned, like steel or cement and many others, they are highly dependent on the hydrogen ecosystem. Yeah? So how will we manage to come up and with and provide green hydrogen in a large scale. Yeah? So the steel industry is dependent on that. There are many other things where you capture carbon and then go in further use needs hydrogen. So and this you can't achieve alone. You need the politics, you need regulation, you need international support, and you need joint forces of many companies. If you look at Verbund, Lafarge, or OMV, Borealis, they are joining forces are already there to think and play together. So I think this is the difference. It's a global problem, a large-scale problem, and it needs an ecosystem approach.
Right.
And when it comes to barriers, it's very often a trust topic and an organizational topic. Trust problems very often come from that partnerships are driven also in large corporates by single people. So they are single believers and they have they are partners of choice. So when it's too much focused on single people, it's often a problem. So you need to have a very broad base in the corporate where the trust is based on. And wrong expectations is another one. That it was not clear what do we want, and then organizational setup, especially when it comes to corporate startup corporations. A startup is quick, needs quick decisions, is used to have the decision instantly, and so on. Corporates have their processes. So this is very often a potential conflict in there, which makes it difficult to succeed.
Michaela, have you had any false starts with partners that you've then had to kill and continue, or how has your experience been on the ground, actually?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And as an early stage startup, we started building our partnerships over about 9 months ago. And it's been a long journey, to be honest with you. In the mattress industry that we work in, and obviously we're trying to create a no-waste solution, it doesn't always go down well with our competitors, since they don't see always the business case for it, and especially they don't see the problem that's ahead of them in terms of the climate crisis that we all face. So from our side, it's a lot of education. So exactly what Glacier have to do. We have to really explain why we're doing what we're doing and what that actually means on a value chain level. As a result, our partners we're very lucky actually. We have really transparent and trustful partnerships in place right now. It did take a few false starts with other partners, if we're being very transparent. But I would completely echo Thomas's points. We build all our partnerships with a clear vision in place from the start. And our vision is very simple. It's to end mattress waste. So every partner we work with knows that that's the shared vision we're all working towards, and that's why we select them as a partner. We also share similar values and mindsets so that we're on the same page from the start. And we also make sure that there's always strong leadership support in the background, because without that, it's not going to go anywhere. So when we start these discussions, we really make sure to have the key stakeholders around the table and really work out, okay, if this isn't going to work, what's plan B? And as a result, we have been able to build a value chain now with 6 partners across Europe, everywhere from our producer to our logistics partners and also to our recycling and waste partners. So it's been a long road, but yeah, as I said before, circular economy requires intense collaboration. So without these partners, we wouldn't be able to actually deliver our solution.
Have you gotten some pushback from, let's say, your competitors who would prefer a linear business model to continue?
Absolutely. Like any industry, it's difficult for these mattress companies who have been in the industry for over 100 years in some cases to change all their processes and their design approach, especially when they're using machinery that's millions of euros and has been in place for over 20 years. You know, to change all of that to be able to produce in a more sustainable way, they see just huge money required for that change. So then showing them why that change is so important and actually the value they can get from that is the trickiest part for us. So that education piece I mentioned is a huge piece of our puzzle. But, you know, we're a young, small startup team. And being faced with this huge problem and trying to then educate an industry, it's really not easy for us, but we do make it our mission to share what we do. We're very open with our approach. We're very open with our mattress design because, like you said, we want to create this open environment where our competitors can actually work with us to transition that change together.
All right. Very good. Cognizant of the time, we have 15 minutes. Andy, short comment. Yeah. Microphone.
For the first time we heard sorry. For the first time we heard the word values, and I think values, you know, I still think nowadays we see values as a nice to have for companies, but I think they could be a compass for us when deciding to work with whom. But first of all, and I think in the startup community, this is more and more happening, that you really live up to your values. Because ideally, it's not just standing on a website somewhere, but the company is really living it. And interestingly, what's happening in companies nowadays, employees are tearing down the posters from the walls where the values of the companies are standing because the companies are not living up to the values. And we see real movement happening in the companies where we say for like 10 years ago, 2 out of 100 employees were interested in the topic of sustainability. And nowadays we see 30, 40, in some companies, 50% of the workforce that really want to be part of the solution and that really want to do something. And in terms of that, I believe values will play a more and more important part. And if you really live up to these values, it will be way more easy to build up these partnerships as long as you live them.
Right. Values equals trust also. Sebastian?
I want to add something that Thomas said. I absolutely agree with your 3 topics, points, bless you, about successful partnerships. I also think that it starts with trust. Then, of course, you need a clear definition of the expectations and the structure for all the cooperation. But I would add also commitment because, and that's a tricky part, because very often the priorities for the different partners are different. For example, it may be that for a startup, a partnership is extremely important with the corporate, but for the corporate, it's just a side project. And so that's a very, very important part because you can have all the rest, but if the commitment is, it gets lost, yes, then the partnership will not work.
Good point, yeah.
I have a very important question to Michaela. When I buy a sustainable mattress, apart from feeling better that I bought a sustainable product, do I feel any difference? Because it sounds very simple. So the companies invested millions of euros to make it complicated, and now you're simplifying it. Is there a difference when I sleep in there?
Very good question. No, our mattress is of the highest quality. Actually, it's a premium mattress, so it's made from premium steel springs, which have over 30 years lifespan in just one spring. And I might get in trouble for what I'm about to say, but I'm a huge believer that mattresses are marketing. All those layers that you see in your mattress, all those different colors of foam, of cotton, it is personally, I believe, marketing. It doesn't need to be that complicated. You can get your great night's sleep and the proper support you require with 2 materials. Now, of course, it's not just 2 materials on top of each other. There's a lot of design elements in there, and it has a soft 3D layer on top. So, yeah, we do take the sleeping quality very seriously, but you don't have to compromise on that with the sustainability.
Okay.
I think you'll just have to try, Thomas.
Yeah, try.
I want to open up now for questions. Does anybody have a burning question from the audience here in the room or via Slido through the live stream? If so, please raise your hand or put your question in the internet. I have already a couple of questions from people watching. Let's see who wants to take this. Perhaps, well, I'll just read the question. It says, is supporting sustainability innovations also financially beneficial? Do you have an opinion on this? Or is it only a cost factor, I guess, is the question.
I have a clear opinion on that. In the long run, it has to go hand in hand. Yeah, value for people, planet, and profit will merge, for sure. In the short run, it can be costly, but I believe in the long run, it's really part of the game. And for the early movers, it can be a source for strategic advantage and for USP. I'm 100% convinced for that.
Any other thoughts, Michaela?
Yeah, I would very much echo what Thomas says. And if I go back to the mattress industry and the hotel industry as an example, hotels have to reduce their CO2 emissions per room by 66% within the next 8 years. That's a huge amount, 66% per room. So we're talking huge change here from a hotel perspective. And in line with that, you're going to see them putting pressure on suppliers to get better at what they're doing. So your own customers are going to be demanding this from you. And I strongly believe that the short-term pain of the money will pay off in the long term for sure, and also transition on an industry level, everyone to be more sustainable and to make things so that there has to be no waste in mind, and that CO2 can also be reduced as a result. So strongly agree.
So they won't let me in with a plastic bottle in the future, because
Yeah,
if
probably.
I leave it there, it's no good.
Yeah, probably.
Andy.
Yeah, what we see right now happening is the pressure on the corporates is increasing exponentially at the moment to act. It's happening already at the big companies. For example, Microsoft is a really good example. They even want to become carbon negative. So they want to, so to say, vanish their whole CO2 that they so far put up in the air. They want to extract it again. And it's trickling down. When you talk to small and medium enterprises in Austria, they don't see it yet. The pressure is not there. There are some, but I would say the companies that we talk, but it's just a matter of time. I'm 100%, it's just a matter of time, because it will become more expensive to emit CO2. The pressure from all kind of stakeholders, investors, clients, and interestingly, employees is increasing day by day. And now for this transformation of the companies, you need innovation. So we have so many solutions that are not developed yet that we will need in the future. And this is why I would say, of course, there are technologies where you need to do a lot of research that needs costs a lot of money. But I think there are also often simple solutions that we see happening. It's a car sharing app or etc. So really just smart solutions that you can implement easily, which can be a super successful business model. But then to add one thought, I think we also need to think about the model of capitalism and think about the impact capitalism. Because until now, air, water, and earth was more or less for free, and this is not possible anymore. So we need to have this ecological footprint priced for what we do.
Just commenting on this, I think there are a lot of low-hanging fruits you can do. And I admire what you are doing with Glacier, because the source of every change is the mindset of the people. So this is the very first thing. And we see a lot of change also in the medium-sized companies now. And apart from the regulation and the reporting needs, there are two sources of pressure. The first one is coming from the people, from the employee market. That it's more and more important that there is a purpose, that the company is positioning themselves on the sustainability side on a good track. And the second one is coming from larger customers, the stock listed companies, the public companies. They are a little bit further in their journey, and they are asking for certificates. They are asking for sustainability ratings. They are asking for EPDs, for product declarations. And there the pressure is coming from, and they need to move.
Sebastian?
Going back to the question, for me it's a clear yes, because there are a lot of low-hanging fruits. Example, in the energy sector, there are tons of different tools or startups for decreasing the energy or improving the energy of buildings and so on.
We have a question. Very good. I'll let you speak into this.
Thank you. I think there's a third factor. It's not only the employees and the companies, but it's also the financial sector. No company will receive money, and will have to pay an even more expensive insurance fee, if they are not sustainable. This is coming up. And two other questions. Yeah, you have been speaking about cooperation, and I think it's very important. But I think there were two more ideas about cooperation. One would be we need financial syndicates who will finance this new innovation, and I think there's really a change happening right now. Yeah, I'm doing capital raising for impact companies, so I know they are speaking together. They are not anymore competitors. They try to find solutions. Yeah, and that's really good. That's good news. And the second one, I think partnership could also be possible. I just have one thing in my mind regarding energy. Yeah, you know, industrial heat could be enough energy for another company. So the partnership SDG 16 could even be more than sharing ideas regarding new ideas, but also using energy together and yeah, financial syndicates. And my question: do you have any experience in that field?
That's actually one of the questions in Slido as well. How do you secure the financing for sustainability innovations that are maybe not profitable in the short term?
I think it's a lot about sharing the risk. Yeah? And when I share the burden of financing, then I spread out the risk a little bit. Yeah? And in my opinion, the corporates I work with, they have, it's not a problem to finance the investments which will pay off in the long run. Yeah? At the moment, they are fighting a lot with the environment and the security on the regulations part. Yeah. So how will be the CO2 certificate awarded? Will there be another round? Won't there be? How many will it be? Yeah? If I go, when I'm a steel company, yeah, I go into direct reduction where I need a lot of hydrogen. Will the hydrogen in 2030 be available in that scale what I need? So these are the problems, risk factors in the whole ecosystem, which make them be careful on the financing side. I think that the money itself, when it's invested in a thing which is good for the planet and in the long run also good on the economic value side, it's not the topic.
Any thoughts? How did you raise your financing?
Yeah, I mean, being a startup, we're obviously always looking for financing. You know, we're trying to solve a huge problem. We managed to secure corporate investment and some public funding. So being in Austria, we're very grateful that the public funding landscape here is very supportive. So I think that's a huge piece of the puzzle. We also see, for example, in circular economy, there's now from FFG a huge circular economy shared collaboration funding for several companies to go in together and share costs and risks. So we see they're also creating new models for financing as well. I also think, though, that's where the whole startup collaboration with corporates piece can play quite nicely. So you mentioned with Glacier, Andy, that that's exactly what you do. You bring startups into corporates to inspire and show what's possible. And I think from a financing level, that's also possible on a corporate startup level. And for example, with Pioneers, that's exactly what they do. They bring the two together, show the risk, share the risk, and then work on small projects to prove if it's possible or not, and then scale it from there. And I also think that's a very good starting point from a financing level as well.
Great, thank you. One more question here.
Since we talked about capital markets and financing, I was interested in your view on ESG as a catchphrase and your take on whether it's a useful model or the way it's being used at the moment. Is it good, you think? Is it moving in the right direction, or is it perhaps not perfect, a little flawed, and could it be improved?
Well, I obviously ESG doesn't measure the impact that a company has on the world. It measures the risk the world has on the company. So from that point of view, it's an interesting metric if you want to analyze the risk of a stock, for example, but it says nothing about how good this company is for the world. If you just take the example of Tesla and Exxon, Tesla being kicked out of an index and Exxon being included. So I definitely think there is a lot of room for improvement in that area. It needs to be upgraded. The metrics by which you measure it are very different. There are different indices, there are different rating agencies, and so on and so on. It's very confusing for a normal investor to navigate that jungle. So yes, I think it's it provides some basis, but it's definitely not enough. And with that, I think we have to end this session. It's 11 o'clock. New sessions are starting. And thank you very much to all the panelists. And thank you for everybody watching on the live stream.